Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you, depending on where you are. That's for one of our panelists coming up. Welcome to day two. Thanks for a good crowd showing up. Day two of Streaming Media Connect. Got some great content all day today and all day tomorrow. This panel is a great one, and I'll get to it in just a second. But first, some busy work. The first person in our audience to name the artist and song that was just playing or music that was just playing and is around at the end of this panel. So it's not enough to just put the answer in. You have to be here at the end of the panel. The first person to do that will win a $50 gift card from Amazon, courtesy of Streaming Media Connect. The second thing is, if you have questions, don't put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A, hence the name Q&A. And about 45 minutes into our panel, I'll transition and we'll start answering questions from the Q&A itself. So as the panel is going, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A, not the chat. Also, all the content from Streaming Media Connect will be up on their YouTube page next week. Steve, our producer, will put that in the chat, that link in the chat. Steve will also put other interesting links about bios of our panelists there, so you can look at the chat for information and links. Look to the Q&A for your questions and answers. I think that's about it, unless I'm missing something. So without further ado, I'd like to invite all of my panelists for this panel to the stage. As the title denotes, this is our strategy session on how to make OTT monetization work, and how to say the word monetization. So this is a great collection of people from very different points of view across the streaming universe. And I think, what's interesting about the moment we're in is that there's all this transition of both audiences, mind share, and dollars to streaming on CTV and other platforms. But the business models are not necessarily all solved for everybody. Nor are they as monolithic as the previous era has been. I like to call this era the user-centric era of media. So we're going to talk about that today. But first, rather than me introducing each of our panelists and reading stuff off of a card, I'm going to go around the horn and have everybody introduce themselves, tell us what the heck they do, and tell us a little bit about the company they work with. Let's start with the furthest traveled panelist from Berlin, Ophelie Boucaud from Dataxis.
Right. Thank you, Evan. So yeah, my name is Ophelie, and I work as a research analyst for Dataxis. It's a company that's doing market research across the media and telecom industry. Specifically, I've been working on countries across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia Pacific. So I would try to bring a more global perspective to the panel and try to talk a little bit about what's happening outside of the US. So yeah, I hope.
And I think that's a kind of important perspective, because I think a lot of people in our industry tend to be very myopically focused on North America only. And
to be fair, also, like, the global players are mostly coming from the US and they're trendsetters across the globe, but it's quite interesting to see also how their strategy impacts the way that local actors adjust their business model to the streaming industry, and also how the global players themselves compete in those other markets, and how they adjust their own strategies outside of the US to fit markets which don't really have the same structure.
Yeah, so Ophelie will bring us a kind of global and also, I think, competitive set point of view. Smriti Sharma brings us the consumer point of view. So Smriti, you want to introduce yourself, talk about what you do and what your company does?
That sounds good. Thanks, Evan. Hi, I'm Smriti Sharma, and I head consumer insights for PCH. I have worked my entire career in technology, so I'm very closely connected with data and its utilization. And I'm not a researcher, but my job is to make sure that the research is done on good data so that the right insights come out of it. That's what led me to lead this group. Just a quick, like everybody, at least in US, in our age group, know what PCH is. PCH has provided joys in a lot of American families by bringing the big check. Everybody recognizes PCH by the big check that they bring to people's house. We are a 70-year-old company, and we have awarded up to $576 million worth of prizes till date. PCH has one of the largest authenticated audiences outside, obviously, of the major social platforms, which allows PCH, to provide privacy first personalized campaigns that can take care of fraud, bots, and yet provide exceptional data and right data sets for the insights that are being produced. So that's a brief about PCH.
And that panel is 15 million registered users on the platform that you use to create these insights. And we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds. Eric, fascinating company. You and I have known each other for a while, but you've been there about 3 years. Tell us a little bit about what you do and what Common Sense does.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Eric Berger. So I'm the CEO of a business called Common Sense Networks. We are a for-profit affiliate of Common Sense Media. If you're familiar with them, they're a nonprofit that's been around about 20 years doing ratings and reviews of movies and TV shows to help parents make decisions around media at the intersection of technology and media. They do advocacy, and they have programs in schools around digital citizenship. But this company is really focused around the dramatic shift of viewing habits among kids, mostly to open user-generated platforms, short-form content, and a lot of the issues that are associated with these platforms being designed for adults. And so we offer a couple of different services. One is a family-directed consumer service under the brand Sensical, which is a safe, age-appropriate streaming service, AVOD, SVOD, fast channels. I'm sure we'll talk all about this. A really vibrant creator community that we have, an interesting contextual advertising network and solution that we've developed for the kid space, which we think unlocks some value in that market. And then some B2B services. So we work very closely with YouTube and TikTok on relationships with them on programming youth services. I'm sure we'll get into more of that during the panel.
Cool. Yeah, and the kid space is both a kind of ripe for monetization and also complicated to monetize at the same time. So very interesting space to talk about. And then last, but certainly not least, Lana LaRusso from Atmosphere, which is also a fascinating differentiated company in the OTT space.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lana. I work at Atmosphere. Atmosphere is the largest streaming platform for businesses. So we are in over 65,000 locations. That's bars, restaurants, gyms, salons, golf courses, airports. We are really blanketing the country. We have our platform looks exactly like any other streaming platform like Netflix or HBO Max, where the venue gets a box from us. They pull up the screen. They get to choose from over 40 content channels. We have our own content studio. We also work with influencers to create and capture their content. So all of the content is this bite-size, these bite-sized pieces of content that really keep the people engaged. I mean, how many times have you been in a salon or a bar where there's just been, something up on the screen that you can't hear what they're saying, you don't know what's going on, it's just a bunch of talking heads. And we give people content that are really engaging. And in the case of bars, we kind of match up next to what they have on. So if we have a sports news channel, we have partnerships with all the major league sports organizations for highlights. And then if you're in a salon or spa, there's something like Happy TV. So we really kind of understand that confluence of people kind of looking up from their phones, being present where they are, and having something engaging to watch.
So you curate the experience for each venue itself, or does the
venue
they
choose
from like an array?
But we curate it for each.
I don't know that I understood that until just now.
Yeah, we curate it for each channel, but
so there's an array of different choices, and that's both linear and on demand.
Yes.
Ah, that's fascinating.
Yes.
That's very cool. All right. And then just really quickly, you monetize via fees from the venues, or do you monetize through advertising exclusively?
We monetize for advertising exclusive. The venue actually gets it. It's a free service to them. They just have to stream a certain amount of hours. So we take their credit card. They have to stream a certain amount of hours, which we track, and they always do it.
And are you doing an inventory split or a revenue split with your publishing partners?
No, well, they're all our channels, so it's all of our revenue.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Awesome. So really interesting, very differentiated. Like when you think about OTT, I think you think, very specific thing. And that's a very differentiated product. And I also think when you think of OTT, in the history of OTT, it started with kind of everything was free, YouTube, right? And then there was this dramatic shift, during the previous decade towards no ads. just subscription, right? And so there's this dramatic swing the other way, and then everybody chased Netflix down that rabbit hole, and now there's this dramatic swing back to an ad-supported thing. So before we get into the kind of various forms of models out there, Smriti, I thought over the last year, together, my company of yours have interviewed tens and tens of thousands of consumers across the country on their attitudes towards both subscriptions and advertising. And I think it's very instructive before we get into like, okay, what model should I use to look at the consumer's point of view? What is the big takeaway that you get with regards to the consumer points of view around the monetization strategies that publishers bring to consumers across OTT?
Yeah, I think in the world of infinite media choices, the big question is what will people pay for? What will it pay for? Like who will pay for what, and what will the subscriber subscribe to, right? I think the first study that we did was around 15,000 Americans, and we only study around Americans just because we are restricted to American pool bases, about the interest in paying for content and which content that they'll pay for. And it was fascinating to see that we all believe that people are not ready to watch ads or pay for some things like that. But it was so fascinating to see that people actually don't mind paying for certain kinds of things if it is the right kind of a show. And the younger the generation is, the more they are willing to pay compared to an older generation. So, I mean, we have our own households. Like I will be on a Spotify, which is a free version, but my kids will be on a paid version because they want what they want, right? So knowing that younger generation is open to pay for content if the content is good, and knowing that they're also open to watch ads irrespective of the content it is, I think there's a lot of monetization from a publisher perspective if we use that in the right direction.
And then also, when we looked at the average people's attitudes towards advertising, I think we expected people to, kind of, I don't know, be a little turned off by personalization of advertising, but that didn't seem to be the case, especially for younger consumers. They seem to be totally chill about their data being used to personalize ads towards them.
Yeah, I think it was like the data was pretty much divided equally among people who want to have personalized content and people who don't want to have personalized content. I mean, in this world of data security that things have been going on, right? Everybody talks about privacy and stuff like that. Do people really understand what privacy is? Because clearly the only way you can give personalized content is by capturing their data and to identify what they like, right? So people, it seems, do not really care to that extent whether they are getting personalized or not personalized. I think the major choices is if you have the right content, people are going to pay for it and they're ready to pay for it. And I think, Evan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we looked at the demographics of the people, it really didn't matter. Younger generation, age group, diversity, the income group, it was equally based in all levels that people were willing to pay and watch content if that interests them.
Yeah, and I think the attitude towards whether or not I'm going to pay or whether I'm going to watch ads really depended on the content itself.
Yep.
And so, in the case of sports, I think people are just, pretty much used to the fact that they're going to have to pay for it and they're going to have to watch ads, which is this kind of weird dichotomy amongst like Thursday Night Football. It's on Amazon. I'm paying for it.
Yeah.
And I'm also watching it at the same time. Yeah,
I mean, the other thing that was fascinating was that, like sports is a big industry that is coming up. We were just talking about sports before this, right? As I was saying, we are a sports family and we move channels based on where sports are moving. Today we are watching football, and if it moves from Amazon to Netflix, you're going to switch. Like, that's not even a choice. We are going to switch. That's what is happening today. Like, people who follow the right content, like I experienced it myself. I mean, I was mentioning to somebody that I watched Suits all 8 season, and they moved from Netflix to Amazon, and I hardly watch Amazon, but I actually had to switch to Amazon to watch that, because that is what I wanted to watch. Of the 1 hour that I did dedicate to myself in the day, I would like to watch for something that I will enjoy, and I'm ready to pay for it.
Yeah, so that opens up kind of lines of questions for a bunch of our panelists, but I'm going to go to Ophelie first. The sports question to me is a very interesting one. So you look at, we were talking about cricket just before the panel started, and the cricket question in India in particular is an interesting one. So Disney tried to make cricket work on streaming, dramatically didn't, because they basically overpriced the market. They just didn't understand how paid versus free works in the market there. And then so Geo wound up with the streaming rights, and now they're just blowing up. They're getting like 30-40 million concurrent streams on mobile predominantly there. It's interesting. So in Europe and MENA and the territories you cover, a lot of times the sports are on public service media. So no ads and no fees. But I think there's going to be a shift. Like, are you seeing a shift in these markets?
It's already shifting in some markets. So if we take Europe, for example, sports is the sports rights are fragmented across different typologies of actors. So it's not just the public service broadcasters, but you have telcos investing also in sports rights. So from their TV platforms, you have Sky, famously, which has soccer rights in the UK and in other big markets. Canal Plus in France used to be a big actor, but they actually stopped buying soccer rights due to the price. So telcos were very much engaged, and now they're retracting actually from the sports rights industry. You also have pure player on the OTT market. So Amazon Prime also invested in soccer rights in France. They're also present across other Europe top 5 territories. You have DAZN, which is a really big actor in the German-speaking markets, and they're also quite active across the region, and other dedicated services in smaller territories and smaller sub-regions. In MENA, you have beIN, which is one of the 2 biggest TV platform in the region, and they also launched a service during the World Cup, right before the Soccer World Cup, named Todd, which gained a lot of traction also because they had the sports rights for the whole competition. So it's definitely a very interesting premium content to leverage, to gain reach, to also gain eyeballs. And what we see mostly with sports is it's not sustainable by itself, because the rights are just crazy expensive. There's no way you're gonna.
Yeah, so that's my other big question is, if you look at the United States, so football is basically moving piece by piece to big tech. NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube, Thursday Night Football on Amazon. Even Peacock is going to have an exclusive playoff game in first quarter next year. But the big techs are, Apple's supposedly going to pay billions of dollars for Formula One here. Is there a possibility that the skies? I mean, ProSieben just announced terrible results again. So are the commercial entities like the telcos? Well, I guess the telcos have other resources to invest because they're not just a programming entity. But will the pure pay television players be able to compete for the rights costs for these sports against the Amazons and the Apples and the Googles? And the stuff?
On the short term, likely no, and that's why we've seen telcos going out of the market. We see also that broadcasters are not necessarily able to follow the hike in prices, but the sports rights are very special in the way that they're quite disconnected from the real value of content. The way that you can monetize and make money out of sports content is completely disconnected to the price of rights. So usually it's leveraged as an incremental source of reach. You bring the fans on your platform and those will pay more. So you take your ARPUs higher But ultimately, it's always considered in a bundle with connectivity or with other types of content. And players like DAZN really killed the market for the established players. So we used to have, you know, like sports packages on Sky would be around 40-30 pounds. Now you have DAZN, you can just take a monthly
Yeah, but
subscription for 15 pounds.
is DAZN profitable?
No.
Okay, yeah. Like
Yeah.
again, like I
That's
just
the
don't
thing. Like,
understand how they stay in business, to be blunt. Just because they're
they're
spending all this money for sports rights, I can't imagine they're profitable. Someone's going to buy
that's
them at some point, right?
that's the big question of like not if but rather when.
When, right,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
so I think one of the kind of hidden secrets, so a not so secret part of streaming right now is that sports is going to be the thing that basically kills broadcast as it leaves broadcast and moves to, you know, pure streaming platforms. I think one of the hidden secrets in OTT is kids. Is, you know, my memory says that somewhere around between 30 and 40% of Netflix usage is kids. That the #1 channel in kids is probably YouTube, and then the #2 is probably Netflix, and then Nickelodeon. And does the Disney Channel even exist anymore? And Amazon has a ton of kids programming as well. So you've got kind of like you have the YouTube Kids, which is kind of an ad-free environment to a certain extent. And you've got the Netflix kids environment, which is totally ad-free. And then you've got the European rules around kids programming, which is really difficult. So Eric, kids seems to be kind of a stickiness, great retention, because kids are stupid and they'll watch the same show over and over again. Like Peppa Pig, same episode over and over again. But like it doesn't seem to have the same kind of high end cost that sports does. Has great retention, but it does seem, at least, and I'm not a kids programming expert, but it seems to have kind of a somewhat of a ceiling on revenue through advertising, you know, because of the rules around it and the protections around it. Am I missing something?
I think most of that is correct, but there's a couple nuances there, which is YouTube is far and away the largest platform, but it's not YouTube Kids, it's YouTube Main. And so YouTube Kids it's fantastic what's happening there, and we're partners with them and we're working with them to make a great product. But the data shows out that overwhelmingly the majority of kids are on the main product there, and overwhelmingly YouTube is dominant relative to all the other streaming platforms. You're right about Netflix. It's a pretty big drop off after Netflix. And what a lot of the large streamers found in the last year or two, they've cut back dramatically on their investment in kids, on kids production, because while yes, it helps with some of the stickiness and retention, there is this movement over to YouTube and TikTok and those types of platforms. And so it's not strong enough to hold people onto the platform, and it's definitely not a customer acquisition tool that's happening for them. So the content investment that they're making, they're putting into more adult programming as a result of that, because they need to get people onto the platform and to, you know, then in turn move from acquisition to retention. So the second part of your question around monetization is also true. I mean, look, this used to be, there were 3 channels. It was very easy. It was regulated. It wasn't complex. People knew where to place the media, and those players all knew. They said it's a $5 billion market. I get $1 billion, you get $1 billion. It was very clear. But it's highly, highly fragmented now, and the money is scattered all over the place, not just to YouTube, but to all the channels, to all the creators, to different platforms, to influencer marketing, to Roblox, to different games. And so the industry as a whole is trying to figure out, where are the eyeballs? How do I monetize them in a compliant and safe way? And how do I measure that or prove that this media is being effective?
And to double down on this and kind of broaden it out from the kids thing, because you're not just a kids enterprise, but you're also kind of experts in YouTube. Because you work with them and you understand, and you actually help them curate kids content for their platform. I think there's this, so between 55 and 60% of all advertising on the planet Earth goes to 3 companies.
Yeah.
Meta, Amazon, and Google. And so I think there's this misperception that you can create a publishing entity on the planet Earth right now and not work with those three companies.
So it's you're 100% right. I mean, we started as part of our business an AVOD service. How could you possibly get enough scale to just run an AVOD business and think that that's meaningful? And as you said, you have to be on those platforms, but for kids, you really have to be on YouTube in particular. So the way that we've done this is we've built out a contextual ad network using data that we have from content evaluation. So we evaluate every frame of every piece of content for programming purposes, not only to vet it to make sure it's okay, but also to classify it by very tight age segmentations, by learning benefits, by DEI characteristics, and topics. And all that helps for programming, but all that helps for contextual placement. And we have the ability to serve ads back onto the creators' channels from whom we license on YouTube. That's about 6-7 billion views last month, over 40 million uniques. So it puts us into a different scale, even though we're a relatively new market, and allows us to get like very hyper targeted on contextual marketing. So you can't take any personal identifiable data with kids, but the contextual match. So if a foot apparel, an athletic shoe apparel company, they say we want movement, dance, and sports. We want role models and teamwork. We'd love to have BIPOC creators. We have no idea where to find that in the sea of all of YouTube. We're like, this is it. Like, these are the channels that make the most sense, and we can place that effectively.
Yeah, and I think in this day and age, Lana, I'll turn to you. In this day and age, I think you have to be, you have to be cognizant of who your audience is, and you have to be smart about the platforms that you're on. But you have to be really, like, I think Eric's company is a really great example of this. But you have to be really inventive, kind of on a constant loop. Because it isn't enough to just have a product and put it out there. You have to stay with the market, ahead of the market, and you have to offer audiences cool things, but then you have to turn around and offer advertisers cool shit too, like differentiated, especially in a world where 60% of all ads go to three companies. It's very easy. Eric talked about the three channels. For a media buyer, like, there's three channels. Like, I could spend all my money on those three channels and call it a day and Don Draper it and smoke a cigarette and have a glass of scotch. But so for a platform like yourself, which it's like you've carved out a really nice white space for yourself, right? An arena where, I'm not saying there's not competition, obviously there is, but you do have kind of a very differentiated product offering in the marketplace. How do you deal with your advertisers? And you're predominantly an ad-based business, correct?
Yeah, no, I mean, that is
what are you doing from a kind of product different beyond just like, hey, we have unique audiences in unique spaces? Like, do you have a kind of differentiated product offering there? Is it all programmatic? Do you do branded content? What is the mix that you take out to the marketplace?
Yeah, that is such an interesting question, because I've been here since January, and we didn't have a New York sales office. We only had a couple people here, and getting advertisers, especially in New York or anywhere really across the country, getting any ad agency or any client to put a new product on their, on their schedule for one of their campaigns is so hard because of what you just said. I mean, prior to this, I worked at HBO Max, and listen, that came with as part of the upfront buy, but even that was hard to get advertisers to come on because their audiences weren't there yet. And so, this is something where you have to say, hey, I have this new product. It's in all these venues. And then you have to say, all right, well, we're in 65,000 venues. So we're not small. We're nationwide. But we don't have sound. It's sound optional. So then that's a problem. And okay, so how are you continually being creative, and how can you buy us, and what other new ideas that we have? And listen, we're open to listening to anything. That's the great thing about being at this company. I mean, this company's been around since 2018, but there was a stop during COVID because no one was going out. Right. And over the past year, it's grown from about 25,000 venues to over 65,000 venues. And that's we deal with not just coming into all these bars and restaurants just all over the place, those one-offs, but building bigger partnerships like a Choice Hotels or, QSR restaurants, and kind of building it that way to get more scale. I mean, we have to be super flexible and nimble. We have to say, yeah, you can run programmatically. You can buy us this, you can buy us direct. We can do custom content. We can create creative for you at no extra premium. We will provide a brand lift study or, a research study with every single campaign you do to prove it out. That's really important. We can target all the way down to the zip code. So like if you're, let's say M&M Mars, we can target anywhere around a Target to get people in there to buy your product. And then we have to be creative with the content. We just launched a newer version to our trivia channel where people can be really interactive in the bars, because we found that people really like trivia. And then, so how do you sort of then make these little things and celebrate them even more inside the bars? Do you provide trivia nights across a certain amount of bars? Do you provide prizes? Do you have advertisers that are able to send in drinks or, you have to get really creative. You have to offer a lot in the beginning. You have to be very flexible and open to it, because getting new advertisers to try something new in a sea of everything else is really hard.
Yeah, and Smriti, I want to double click on something that Eric said earlier with regards to data and privacy things, and you mentioned this earlier. We have a almost 50,000 person survey coming out later this week, the largest survey ever on data privacy and ethics. And so we're breaking a little news here. But I mean, it seems that, on one hand, consumers are kind of very frightened about their data being misused or taken without their permission. And on the other hand, completely oblivious to exactly how their data and privacy is being used. Do you want to kind of crack that open just a hair?
Sure. I mean, yeah, it was very amazing. I mean, as Evan mentioned, we did a survey for approximately 50,000 people, and it was amazing to see. And we all can see from our own experiences how many times we open a site and we get that cookie notification, and what do we do? Do we read it? We just say accept. Actually, you don't have to accept. The site will still work. Like, we all technically know it.
Most
right?
people don't know that.
But we all just do accept and move on. And how many times we open a bank app and we say, I agree. Do we read all that stuff? No. But when a new law comes in, Virginia introduced a law or California introduced a law, we all get panic saying, oh my God, I need to just not, like, I'm not consenting to, like, I'm not consenting to give a data about it. But then they also call back. At least I have noticed it. Like, we have people who will say we are a very privacy first company. We will tell everything that we capture. We will take the consent upfront. And people obviously, they hear news and they talk about it. They will not sign the consent. I'm not consenting to sell the data. I'm not consenting to give the data. But then they will call customer service and they will complain, hey, I'm not able to do this activity because you didn't give us a consent. So
I think that's something important to mention there. So you consider the data that you have zero party data.
Correct.
Explain what zero party data is really quickly.
So nobody talks about zero party data. Everybody talks about first party data. I just want to, harp in on that. First party data is when persons come on your site and they are interacting with the site and you make sense of the data and collect it. For example, they purchase something with Amazon. You are giving them a gift card and they preferred Amazon. So you derive saying that they are Amazon customer because every time they come on the site, they are making their choice of selecting Amazon over Walmart, as an example. It's still a derived data, but it's still very fresh because the customer did it by action. You're making a decision based on the customer's action. Zero party data is when customer gave you a right. You asked a question, do you prefer Amazon versus Walmart? And the customer said, I prefer Amazon over. It's a very straightforward question.
They know they're giving information. They're actively, it's permissive marketing to the
you're not deriving anything out of, like, you're not having a derived data set. You are asking a real question, and the answer, the consumer is giving you a real answer.
So the power of the Insights platform on PCH is really derived by the fact that all 15 registered active users have volunteered information about themselves to you,
Correct.
which powers your insights product, but not just information. Like you ask them, there's like 14,000 different audience attributes that you have, which enable you to, when you do a survey, like, do you like ads or do you want to pay for content? You don't have to ask them how old you are, where you are, how much you make, because they've already told you that information. And so it shortens the continuum of the survey itself.
Yeah, this actually got constructed just because, we see surveys across, like nobody thinks from a consumer perspective. For example, if somebody goes and does survey, and he's going to the same site over and over again to do a survey, every survey for that matter will need to get the data cut based on age, based on demo, based on race, right? Everybody wants to read insights based on those characteristics. But you think from a user perspective,
I have to answer all these boring questions about myself before
every time I come to your site, you ask me
pain in
this
the ass.
question over and over
And
and
it's
over.
why most surveys are like 1,000 people, because it takes so long to recruit.
And think from a user, the user can't, like a 10-minute survey now becomes a 20-minute survey. You're taking the consumer time over and over again. That is one of the reasons you cannot have an age group 18 to 30 do a survey, because they don't have time. Like
or patience, or the attention span.
Yeah, my daughter can't freaking have attention on 1 minute on TikTok. Forget about doing a 15-minute survey.
Well, so I want to pivot that to Ophelie. So are you seeing data as a new transactional mechanism? Are you seeing data? I'm curious, because like I do think zero party, first party data as a new revenue generator. And as a point of differentiation for these OTT platforms seems to be like a new frontier for a lot of these companies. I'm wondering, especially in Europe and MENA, where GDPR and privacy are kind of even taken more seriously than the United States, are these new revenue areas for the companies that you track?
Yeah, so yeah, totally. It goes back also a little bit to what you were talking with Lana about innovation in ad formats and bringing new stuff to the advertisers. So outside of the OTT world alone, there's also a lot that's being done on the TV landscape, especially in Europe. So the GDPR was implemented. It has a very strong, it's a very strong framework to protect data from the individuals, and it's only applying in the European Union, but it's obviously being a framework for territories beyond those borders. And so this is also where the line is drawn from now on when it comes to collecting data and using it for monetization purposes. On the TV screen itself, we've seen very interesting developments around addressable TV. So in the US, you already have ad replacement on the cable networks, because that's something that was done for decades long, I guess. I'm not really familiar, but you have those political campaigns ads that are different from one territory to another.
Of course.
In Europe, we don't have that. So the ad campaigns on TV, they're linear and they are national broadcasts. So you don't get different ads if you're in the north of one country or in the south, for example. But with technology and digital capabilities going on the big screen, now we can do that. So we have ad replacement on linear TV in several countries across Europe, and that's going through the set-top boxes itself. So it creates a new monetization opportunity for the publishers. So the TV broadcasters, they sell those campaigns with a higher price, because you can target them based on demographic data or preference data. A lot of things that can also be matched with retailers, for example. So we have some cases where individual data from the post offices were matched with what the set-top boxes can grant. So you get more information on the size of the household, for example. You could also match this with a campaign for a furniture seller who would want to know like who moved out in the last 6 months. So you can get, like you get an IKEA ad because your set-top box provider actually knows when you just moved in, things like this. So those are like new things that can be monetized on the big screen. That's quite interesting. Then we also see unskippable ads. That was like a thing that advertisers were missing out on, because if you skip the ad watching replay and catch up, then you have all those formats that are just paid for by the advertisers but not consumed. So it's also something that's gaining traction also in countries where we have a lot of IPTV viewing, for example, in Central Europe. It's a big thing. So the technology is actually helping out the TV ecosystem to sort of leverage all the things that they can do around data and to monetize new formats that were just not accessible before then. So yeah, that's quite interesting. And I guess on the OTT side, we'll see exactly the same development, but since they're more digital native, the advertising around data itself is what they're building their proposition on already. So it's less of an innovation for them. I guess it's more of a given. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Eric, to kind of follow that up, it feels like, I mean, yes, when you look at the pure digital players, the innovation's already baked in, right? So they're bringing innovation, kind of forcing innovation on the rest of the ecosystem, especially as like YouTube moves to the connected television and becomes, we talked about this in prep for the panel, they're now the biggest television channel in America and in most territories. Not just the biggest video platform, which they already were, but the largest television channel. How do you see YouTube taking over the connected television and television changing the model of television itself, both in advertising and in other forms as well?
Yeah, well, first of all, as it relates to younger users, everything you were talking about, data, under 13, of course, you can't take any data, and there's a lot of regulation. It's very likely with COPPA 2.0, that's going to go up to 16, which is closer to Europe, which really, that is a very attractive segment that will now no longer be able to have data.
Reach, yeah.
So when you were talking about, is data a currency, content data becomes a bit of a currency in terms of being able to use contextual and to align as much as possible. And there's a lot of research.
What does that mean? So content, so explain what that means.
So the problems with contextual today is people are using keywords or based on some of the metadata. The metadata is created by creators in the case of platforms like YouTube, and the contextual match isn't that strong. And so the better you can be at finding the actual match between the content that's on the screen and the advertising, the better it is from the consumer experience and the higher the engagement is. A lot of people have proven this. We've proven this as well. And that's not just like a topic, like it's a hiking video and it's an REI ad, but sometimes it's also the sentiment and the mood. It's teamwork, it's role models, it's empathy, and it connects, and you're sort of drawn in. And why people like contextual, there's a lot of arguments of contextual more than behavioral, is behavioral is based on past behavior. So how many times have you looked for a pair of shoes and then it follows you all over the internet, but you've already made the decision not to buy it or you bought it? And contextual is much more in the moment. And so the power of YouTube and the combination from our perspective of thinking about this being 16 and under, not just 13 and under from a contextual, it's really important to get the data piece right and to scale as much as the sea of content as possible as you can. And so we've taken 3 years of content data from evaluating content, and we've been working with Deloitte on supersizing these data sets using machine learning so that we can effectively catalog the sea of content that is appropriate for kids and be able to slice and dice it through over 300 different types of metrics.
Without having to collect any data from the end user.
Without any user data whatsoever, and with an eye on something like YouTube's dominance and the importance of being able to transact on a platform like that.
Yeah, as Steve just said in the comments, please drop your questions in the Q&A. We're going to open it up to questions any second. But Lana, I want to actually veer off that last prompt a bit, which is, you have a totally innovative product. There are tons of innovations, and Ophelie talked about this with regards to set-top box, but also across, CTV. There's a bunch of studies out. Actually, just Samsung put out something, I think either this week or last, about how the ad experience on CTV from a consumer's perspective is so much better than it was on linear because it's much more personalized. They're more contextual, to Eric's last point. But that brings up kind of a larger issue, which is, and I imagine that a company like Atmosphere faces this, as much, if not even a little bit more than others, which is we lack a true collective currency. we lack a unified source of truth in measurement for video.
Yeah.
Full stop. And so you came from HBO Max, you know, or Max.
Yeah.
And just Max.
Yeah, just Max.
And now you're at a kind of interestingly different enterprise at Atmosphere. But like when you talk to, so you have you've been in ad sales for a minute. So you know, you talk to the agency partners, right? You talk to, you know, brand managers at brand buyers. What is their attitude? How do they see the world, and how do we get around? I mean, I know JIC is, you know, trying to fix this. Nielsen, I consider an absolute joke. You know, you've got Video Amp, you've got iSpot out there inventing new currencies which feel much more tech forward. But what's the conversation you're hearing writ large in the buying and selling community around this just lack of unified source of truth?
Yeah, I mean, that's another interesting thing because people don't really understand how to buy us. They're like, well, you're video, but you're not in the home. So we can't really measure you. You don't have sound. You might have sound. Like it's just, so it goes back and forth. And to your point, I think that the majority of the clients or the ad agencies are buying either with Video Amp or iSpot, and they don't measure platforms that don't have sound. That's the issue for us right now. So we're measured by something called the People platform, which was born out of Nielsen, and outdoor buyers understand that, but video buyers don't. So, you know, it's this, listen, we'll take it wherever we can get the, you know, the dollars right now. However, for longevity purposes, sometimes you want to be bought from that video perspective because there's a lot more dollars there. But yeah, you know, that's the thing. We have to continue to innovate, and we try and work with all these different places. Like we want to work with Video Amp to find a solution, because again, we are a video platform. We run like a video. We serve all our ads dynamically. We understand how long people are streaming for. We know what channels that they're streaming on with us. We have all that information, all that data, but we're not bought that way in most cases. So again, it's continue to have these conversations and really kind of push those companies to be open. You know, again, I would say on the larger perspective, we find that it is kind of consolidated to those two companies, Video Amp and iSpot. But yeah, the forms of measurement change all the time. And you know, again, when you talk about the ratings with Nielsen, that wasn't a perfect science either, because people were clicking in. You could get up, you could go to the bathroom. How do you know you're engaged? I mean, I'm on my phone all the time doing 5 different things as I'm watching one show. You know, here it was the same thing. Well, how do we know people are really looking up at the TV at the time that the ad comes out? It's like, well, do you know that in linear television? No.
Well, I mean, it goes back to that John Wanamaker quote. I know half my marketing money is being wasted. I just don't know which half, which he said in 1927.
Right.
Or something like that. So, and we're still dealing with it.
Yes.
Ophelie, there's a question in the Q&A from an anonymous attendee that actually, you know, ties right into this about measurement in EMA and your territories. Like, what is the conversation around measurement? I mean, you don't have Nielsen there, you have various other ones. What's the conversation around measurement being had there?
A lot of different conversations all together at the same time. So just to give you a bit of context, the TV ADX in Europe is like half of the TV ADX in North America. But when we talk about online, America is like North America represents 5 times the online ADX in Europe, which gives you an idea of how advanced the US are compared to Europe, which is among the most advanced market out there, like outside of North America. The like buying ads is still in the video environment is still very fragmented, because you have so many different
still
ad sales
immature in
houses
those territories compared to the US too, right?
Yeah, and people are not necessarily always agreeing on the method to buy as well. So some will go for GRP, some will go for CPM. As we go towards CTV advertising and a more digital environment, it will naturally evolve towards CPM. But at the moment, we still have a lot of broadcasters, for example, which have their own digital OTT platform on BVOD, and which are selling inventories bundled with what they sell on linear. So it's more of like direct sales mashup of you're buying inventories across the board. You don't really know where it's going. The ad sales house and the publisher themselves are trying to figure out on their own where the inventory is going. And then the reporting is quite different from one publisher to another. Obviously, the agencies sort of end up having the responsibilities of trying to get an overarching view, not just across different media verticals. So understanding your media mix across out of home, video, print, etc., but also inside video itself, how you're performing on linear and on the different channels, because they won't report back the same kind of KPIs to you and the same kind of metrics as well. You were mentioning before that, of course, the big three, so Meta, Google, are setting up the standards on digital. It's still the case, but it's also not enough. And when talking to some publishers who basically say, you know, like viewability metrics need to go further than what YouTube is offering. We need to sort of distinguish ourselves and show that we have a more premium inventory when we're on BVOD because the content is scripted, etc. But then it just creates new layers of fragmentation again and again. And you end up with CPMs that range from, I don't know, like 10 euros to 150 because you want to target more or less. It's extremely complicated, and I don't really see any solutions at the moment that are trying to put all that under one umbrella that's more coherent for the advertisers in the end. Not yet, at least.
Yeah, me either. Quentin asked a question in the Q&A. Lana, I'll ask you this, but Eric, feel free to weigh in. Feel free to weigh in. Someone asked, like, why didn't we mention Comscore? They're in the process of being certified by the JIC, which better names, please. Yeah, are you hearing Comscore in the same mix as? Yeah, I'm not either.
Not at all.
Why is
Not
that?
video buyers? I really don't know. I think that people are just very wrapped up, especially in the video space, with Video Amp and iSpot right now. And I think getting that in place.
I think it's because of their data sets are so large, and they're kind of creating trying to unified ID type of business that helps not just, and I would open this up to everybody, not just around cost per thousand eyeballs, but really centered on business outcomes. And doesn't that feel like the next frontier? To me, the year ahead is going to be much more driven around actions taken as opposed to people reached. Eric, you had thoughts?
100%. I mean, particularly when this measurement is so arbitrary in some cases, they're like, at the end of the day, I just need to know, am I getting more foot traffic? Am I getting more products sold? The role of shoppable ads and the direct connection to driving their revenue is critical. And, at worst, like, there's brand recall and pre and post, and that's helpful too, more than just the video played. But the outcomes are really important. In kids media, there's a whole thing about, is the parent in the room, is the parent not in the room, with the co-viewing, and can you really measure that, and privacy things. So
well, and I think there's this misperception that performance marketing is this ugly bottom of the funnel thing. And performance marketing, why would you not want your brand campaign to have performance metrics against it, as opposed to just reach metrics? And even with kids, performance can be like, did I watch the whole trailer?
Yeah, no, no, exactly. The outcome, it's something in the ad industry that, the metrics are the metrics. There's a lot of people that are comfortable with the way that things have been done, and it's very easy to just say this many people saw it.
It's weird. It seems like, especially the ad industry drives so much innovation because they drive so much revenue through it, but then at the end of the day, the ad community tends to lag behind the technology by a decade, almost always. And that's gonna leave me with one last question for you all. Beyond advertising and subscription, and let's each of you weigh in here. Where do you think the next great wave of OTT monetization is going to come? There has to be more than simply ads and subscriptions. Amazon is really innovating around connecting ad impressions to purchasing. So do you dig into your 36-month ahead crystal ball, and any of you who want to weigh in first, jump in here. But where do you see kind of next new pockets of monetization coming from in video?
I mean, I think it's just picking up from what we were just saying. I mean, shoppable and commerce are critical because the tools are getting better and better. I mean, if you look at even in the game world, in-app purchases, or at least the ability to upsell someone to something, even if it's software and not physical or not, in a retail store, has been there. But, CTV, this is around the corner. I think that you can take advantage of this to get into a commerce market, which is a much better outcome for a brand than not. So I think that's one of the bigger ones that you're going to see.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. Ophelie, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting point, but from the discussions that I have across Europe and Middle East as well, we still didn't answer the question of how to interact with the big screen, which makes the ads not that shoppable, actually.
But isn't there the ability, because a lot of consumers are on their phone, as you said, while they're watching TV, and in the home they're connected to the same hub.
Exactly. So there's
having them
one
talk
link
to each
there.
other, yeah.
Yeah, there's one link there that can be leveraged, and it was tried with QR codes, but it still requires, like
QR
an
codes,
additional.
so
Yeah,
2004, I know.
exactly. But still, that's one of the way that people are still trying to leverage in some markets. But one thing that could gain traction, especially with YouTube, is like when you connect on your app on mobile, then you just switch to the big screen and you get both ads at the same time. So that one is probably where it's gonna go first, I guess. But it's difficult to see if YouTube is going to capture all that again, or if the other players will be able to implement similar solutions on their own app. I'm not sure yet.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I was going to say that the interactivity between your phone and the screen is going to be something that continues to evolve and continues to blow up. We need that sort of engagement. The
tech is there. I mean, it already exists.
It is, but there's got to be a way that people, that's the whole question of how do I know someone looked at this and was watching it at the time? How do I know the eyeballs were there?
It'd be interesting.
There was actually a study that was made by a Russian audience measurement cabinet. They were distributing out phones that had a mic on it, so it's like a panel thing. So you sign a right, you say like, okay, I agree to have a phone that has a mic on it.
We already have the ability to create a remote control for our television set using the phone that we have.
Yeah, no, they were using it just to figure out like the proportion of people that use their phone while they're watching TV, because the phone could hear if you're watching TV nearby, and it was crazy, like 70-80%. Yeah.
Srini, last thought on this?
I think I agree with everybody's sentiments. Commerce, I mean, just imagine watching your favorite sports and you buy the jersey. Impulse shopping has always been the key of the industry. So this is, just another medium on that.
And to Simon Applebaum's point in the chat, Roku and their shoppable stuff is definitely worth watching. All right, so our winner of the contest is Paul Filio, who got the answer correct. Sly and the Family Stone, you better help yourself. And he's still here. Thank you, Paul. And so you're a winner of a $50 gift card. We have another great session in about a half an hour from now at 11:30 in this same space-ish. We've got the future of streaming, fast, furious, and free. Shabana Rakard Ishaman from Google TV is going to talk about their fast strategy and kind of a larger fast perspective on the industry. Please come back for that. Please come back for all the panels and sessions today and tomorrow. Remember that all this content is going to be up on their Streaming Media's YouTube page next week. Steve will put the link in the chat. Thank you, panelists. This was a great conversation. The hour kind of just zipped by. Really great thoughts, really great content. Thank you so much for your time, your conversation, and just being awesome. Thanks, everybody. See you in about half an hour.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.